Now on Bounce, we continue our series on senior care this week. November is National Family Caregiver Month, and tonight we're talking with Dawn Gartman. She's a family caregiver specialist at Centralina Council of Governments. So thanks for being here on the show tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, some folks are faced with tough decisions on the best care for their aging parents. This happens all the time, and everybody has to deal with it at some point, right?
That's true. We're all going to get older at some point in time, and we're going to have to come up with some of those decisions and have some conversations about what to do with things.
Well, it can get pretty chippy, too, a little times with different families and the way it all kind of pans out, right?
You have that so correct, Alina. You know, having that conversation among families and not necessarily just a couple, you know, it's usually even with siblings, too, and having a conversation about what to do with mom or what to do with dad when you start noticing some of the things that are happening. And really, it comes down to safety. You know, you really want your parents to be safe. And that's a pretty critical decision, but at the same time, you don't want them to, they don't want to lose their independence, you know, or their dignity. And to go through some humiliation, you know, you want them to live with quality of life, but you want them to be safe, and you want them to be happy.
Right, and then you have you run into the families with the fairness issue of saying, I'm taking care of mom or dad more than you're taking care of them. That becomes kind of a troublesome. And the finances. Sometimes people have to wonder where they're going to go broke or lose your job by having to take care of you. It's so messy, isn't it?
It really is, and a lot of us don't plan enough to that we're going to have some health issues down the road. You know, we're going to plan about travel, taking care of grandkids, you know, maybe having a hobby or getting involved with something new to do in our retirement, but we don't always plan for having health issues. So we're not planning it enough and probably putting enough away for those times when that happens. And so that really leaves, you know, for the family to come together, and how do you put those supports in place? You know, we've been doing the National Family Caregiver Month since 1997. And recognizing the contributions that families do for one another in that care, because it's more than just being a child to adult parent, because you're taking on a new role. It's more than what you've done before.
Well, let me ask you this. You were talking about actually planning for it. How do you know when to start planning? How do you recommend that to families to sit down and start? That's got to be the most difficult thing, correct?
It is, and the earlier you start, the better it's going to be. And it's having those open conversations. You can't not have the conversations. You've got to start early, and when they're healthy. When your adult parents have it all about, you know, and they can answer the questions and say, this is really what I want to do. So having those conversations early enough and saying, hey, Mom, when you get older and you're having a little bit of difficulty and maybe having to use that walker, what do you want to do? How do you want us to take care of you? Would you want to live with one of us? Or do you want to stay in your home as long as possible?
That's a tough thing to do, but I do understand. That's what, you know, we kind of run into it, and as your parents get older, everybody runs into that. You have to actually go over the limb and say that, don't you?
But having that conversation is so important, and it's not going to be just one conversation.
Right.
It's going to have to be a series of conversations.
All right. Now, here's the question, because this is another one that's really big. When do you take the driver's license away from your mother, your father? And there have been many arguments about that in the movies, too. You know, you've seen this. So it's a big issue.
Again, we're getting back to, you know, an elder possibly losing some of their independence. If you were to put yourself in their shoes, what would you want to happen? You don't want to stop driving. You've been driving for 50, 60 years probably.
Right.
And it's losing that independence and possibly some humiliation because you're not doing as well as maybe you thought you were doing.
Right.
Sometimes there's an accident might happen, or they get a ticket, and that kind of helps spur the conversation. But sometimes you're not lucky to have that. And sometimes you're just driving along and you're noticing, oh, mom or dad, they're getting a little bit lost. They're not staying within the lane.
Absolutely.
So you need to start being really observant with that. Again, first think about what would you do if it was you. How would you want somebody to approach that subject? So thinking about that before you start having those conversations. But I think taking the time to sit down with your parent and saying, you know, how's that driving going for you?
Right.
Because a lot of times I think they're going to notice it themselves. It's when they don't notice it and they're in denial, that's when you start having the issues.
It all comes back to the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated, correctly?
Correct.
All right. There's a number on your screen right now where you can get more information about how to care for aging parents. The number to Centralina is 1-800-508-5777. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Delano, thank you for having us this week.
Some fantastic information. Brigida, back to you.
All right, Delano, thank you.